Will Serfort was born in a world completely ruled by magic and wizards, but unfortunately, he was an exception as he was born a muggle. He had no magic, and because of that, his childhood was awful, but things started getting even worse when he enrolled in the famous magic academy he was studying with his childhood friend, whom he really adored. His friend was really talented, and she soon became one of the 5 strongest mages, but he stayed at the academy, somehow carrying himself ahead. He wanted to reach by his friend's side, but when all hope seemed lost, the headmaster of the academy showed him the way and helped him discover that his talents lay with the sword and not the wand. She set Will on the path of becoming a warrior in a world of mages, and with a skill set that only he possesses in the world, Will starts his journey of becoming the strongest. He uses his overwhelming strength and skill to enter the dungeon and hunt powerful monsters that most students in his class can't do. He faces off against a bull monster that shoots stones at him with magic, but he simply dodges the stones and finishes it with one slash of his sword. More monsters come to fight him, but he is ready to take them on to prove that he is not inferior to any mage. After that, he goes to the prestigious magical academy that nurtures the brightest minds in the country. Inside one classroom in the academy, a professor named Edward is teaching 6th-year students about combining various items to create sulfur, which is a catalyst for fire-based magic. After delivering the lecture, he calls Will to come to the front of the class to give a demonstration. Will is already tired of what is going to happen next, but his classmates seem to be amused by it. On the table, the 2 ingredients needed to create sulfur are already placed, and Ed eggs on Will to use the simple fire magic to turn it into the desired product. Will's hand trembles as he points his wand towards the ingredients, chanting a spell, but nothing happens at all. Will's classmates knew this would happen and they start laughing, and then Ed further taunts Will, saying that he is only good for taking notes like an idiot and nothing else. Just then, an overzealous redhead named Cheyenne decides to show how things are done and shoots a flame towards the ingredients that burn vigorously and creates sulfur. The flame burns brightly in front of Will and then turns blue, while Ed lectures Cheyenne about not doing anything like this without permission. Cheyenne seems to be a certified douchebag, and he tells the professor that he was just helping Will. Ed decides to drop the matter with that, and then uses a spell that instantly puts out the flame and creates a huge spiky crystal on the table instead. He then chants some slogans about how magic is the supreme power in this world and how their heroes are always mages. He says that everyone is judged based on their talent in magic here, and fools who can't even cast a single spell should not waste their time and drop from the academy. After the class gets over, Will can finally breathe in peace, but that is short-lasted because Cheyenne finds him along with 2 of his lackeys and starts to insult him. But just then, the honor student of their class, Colette, comes there and tells him to stop. Cheyenne asks why an honor student like her is defending a loser, and Cole gets in his face and tells him that Will is far kinder and diligent than anyone else, but most importantly, he is her friend. Cheyenne is taken aback on hearing those words, but then he just laughs and says that kindness and hard work won't make him a great mage. He takes his leave with that and tells Will to take Ed's advice and drop out early. Will and Cole begin walking away, and she tells him to stand up for himself against the bullies. Will says that it is no big deal, and being bullied has its perks because a cute girl like Cole covers up for him so often. Cole blushes on being hit by the smooth criminal, while Will's familiar Kiki yawns and lays on the ground next to them. Cole gets too flustered and pushes Will away, and by the time she's calmed herself down, she finds him gazing at the sky. Above the tall white tower, they see a half-magic circle that continues to crumble and fall apart, but it's how the strongest mages called Magiavander continue to hold the sky in its place. Long ago, the world was under the domination of alien invaders, and the sky was nothing more than an endless spread of darkness. That changed when 5 powerful mages rose to face the invaders. They fought and repelled the invaders, dispelled the darkness, and placed a seal on the sky so that no one could attack them again. The 5 wizards became the heroes of the world, and they were given the title of Magiavander. The title has been passed to the strongest mages of each generation ever since then, and every mage dreams of obtaining it once in their life. Looking at the top of the tower, Cole asks Will if he thinks that the Magiavander named Elfie is watching over them as she usually does, and he is certain that she is doing so. The truth is that Elfie was Will's childhood friend, and she used to tell him stories of the sun and the moon and the distant stars that were floating in space beyond their sealed sky. She told him about the sunset and how it was the most beautiful thing in the world. Elfie longed to see the sunset, and so did Will. She believed that if they reached the top of the White Tower, they could see beyond their sealed sky, and for that, they had to become the Magiavander. Will and Elfie promised each other that they would see the sunset together, but only one of them could make it. Elfie was supremely talented, and she soon earned the distinction of being the youngest ever Magiavander in the world. She left for the top of the tower, but Will, being a loser without magic, was left behind. However, he cannot give up on the promise he made with Elfie, so he still tries his best to rise up the ranks and reach her side. Later, Will goes to the office of Professor Wok, who chews him out for hitting the dungeon again and going to the 7th floor all by himself. He lectures him about the dangers of going to the dungeon, and after apologizing, Will asks him how many extra credits would he get for hunting the monsters. Wok is furious, but he still awards Will 2 credit points for the monsters he has killed today. He then tells Will to give up on his dream of becoming a Mangiavander because just for reaching the next step, he needs to score an incredibly high number of credits, and because he can't even use basic spells, he loses 1/3 points automatically. Will says that he plans to cover up the difference by hunting monsters from the dungeon, but Wok believes that it is impossible because Will is still struggling to pass his class. He tells him that because he failed the recent practical spell exam, he must earn 4 credits within the next 2 days to stay here. Will freaks out on hearing this and begins searching for any monster that is worth 4 credit points, but then Wok tells him about a monster called Baskerville on the 6th floor that can give him enough points. Will is so happy that he hugs his professor, unaware that Cyan heard their conversation, and now he plans to hunt down the Baskerville before Will so that he can get him expelled. Soon after that, Will heads into the dungeon, confident that he can defeat a Baskerville because he has done that again. His familiar, Kiki, is not happy about that because the last time they fought the monster, she almost got burned to death. However, Will promises that it won't happen again and pleads with her to locate the monster for him. Meanwhile, Cheyenne is also leading his 2 lackeys so that he can defeat the Baskerville and steal 4 points from Will when suddenly, one of his friends is punched into the walls by a huge and powerful monster. The other guy screams at the top of his lungs and the voice reaches Will. He quickly runs to the source of the voice to help the person in trouble, but he freaks out on seeing Cheyenne desperately trying to protect himself from a huge monster called Evil Sentinel. That is worth 10 credits. Cheyenne keeps blasting the monster with fireballs while screaming at it to stay away, but his attacks have no effect on the monster. The monster keeps walking towards him and Cheyenne is so scared that he most definitely has crapped his pants. Will thinks that he should save him, but then suddenly, he begins giving the chance to his intrusive thoughts that tell him to leave the bully to his fate. Cheyenne had tormented and humiliated him to no end, and Will thinks that he has no obligation to save him. However, the words of his childhood best friend Elfie suddenly spring up in his mind. He remembers how she called him the kindest and bravest person as she gave him the sports glasses, and as Will puts them on now, he wants to become the person Elfie thought he is. He rushes ahead just as the monster is about to turn Cyan into pounded meat and blocks his heavy sword, creating shockwaves that rupture the very ground they are standing on. Will keeps exchanging blows with the huge monster, and then manages to cut off one of its fingers, making it loosen its grip on the weapon. The monster tries to strike him again and again, but Will simply dodges him. The monster succeeds in hitting him away and then sends huge rocks towards him, but Will deflects them with his sword before rushing towards the monster. He picks speed and quickly circles the monster, reaching behind it and stabbing it in the shoulder. The monster screams in pain and then Will gets away. He parries the next attack of the monster and then quickly climbs onto his sword. The monster tries smashing him to the rocks in the cave, but Will notices that and quickly moves out of the way. As the monster tries to use this chance to deal a finishing blow, Will skillfully dodges his weapon in midair and then slashes off his arm. He then picks up the huge sword of the monster with just one arm and takes his stance. The monster fires a powerful beam at him, but Will slices it with the sword and then swings it faster than the eye can see, instantly defeating the monster. He emerges out of the smoke and approaches Cyan, offering him a helping hand, but the Dachshund grinds his teeth so hard out of frustration that he starts bleeding. Wok and Ed were also watching this through the magic stone on Kiki's head, because Ed was worried about Cheyenne and the 2 boys who went into the dungeon without permission. However, when he sees Will outperforming one of the best magicians in the class and defeating a monster by physical strength alone, he refuses to accept it. He leaves the room like a bitter loser and Wok can't stop him. The next day, Will goes to Wok with the skull of the monster he hunted, and though the professor is initially furious, he awards him 10 credits for defeating the monster. Will is elated and he thinks he is one step closer to his goal of becoming a Mangiavander. Looking back 10 years ago, Will recalls how he was always bullied in the academy. Everyone said that he was given admission only because Elfie refused to join the academy without him, but now that she had reached the position of a Mangiavander, people began discussing that they should get rid of a loser who can't even use magic. Will was constantly in depression, so Wok, who had always been his well-wisher, took him to the academy's headmaster, Cauldron. The old woman took one look at Will and immediately sent a small knife towards him. Will grabbed it, and that instantly woke up something inside him. He predicted that Cal was going to attack him, so he pushed Wok aside and then slashed through all of Cal's attacks like a master. Wok was left speechless by this, But the old headmaster just laughed and declared that she would let Will continue at the academy even though he cannot use magic. With tears in his eyes, Will asked her if he could climb the tower and meet Elfie if he studies at the academy, and Cal told him that if he is diligent and undaunted by the challenges, then he may have a chance. Back to the present, Will attends a lecture by Wok, who tells them about ascending the tower. The first step after graduating from the academy is to reach the upper institute inside the tower, and only those who earn acknowledgement from the upper institute can become the Magiavander. To reach the upper institute, one must either create a new type of magic or earn 7,200 credit points while in the academy. Well, the students in this lecture are as far from both the criteria as can be, because it is supplementary lecture for those whose grades are bordering on the red line. After leaving the supplementary lecture, Will meets Cole, who asks him about the lecture. On the way, they find a small crowd surrounding Cheyenne, while one of his lackeys says how Cheyenne defeated a monster worth 10 credit points. He couldn't see anything after he was knocked out cold, but when he woke up the monster was dead and the lackey couldn't see anyone but Cheyenne doing it. Everyone begins hyping him up, but Cheyenne knows the truth, and just as he sees Will, he snaps. He immediately walks towards him and grabs his collar, accusing him of foul play because a loser like him can't kill a powerful monster. Cole comes to Will's defense, but then the frustrated Cheyenne leaves by his own accord. On the other hand, Ed visits Headmaster Cal, asking her to expel Will because he is a threat to their society because he can outperform magic without possessing even a trace of it. Cal refuses to do so, saying that Will has excellent marks in written subjects, and he also has an interesting outlook in his reports. The only thing he is lacking is magic, but if they ignore that, he is beyond exceptional. She tells Ed that the goal of their academy is to create learned scholars for the fated day mentioned in prophecies. Ed retorts that Will wants to become a Magiavander, and that is a problem. Cal agrees with him and decides to give Ed a chance to prove that Will is not worthy of staying at the academy. She tells him to set up a test for Will and administer it himself, and if the boy cannot pass it, he can expel him. Ed feels like this is a golden opportunity to fulfill his petty desires and takes his leave. However, Cal has faith that Will is going to certainly pass the test, and then Ed will understand what he is made of. On the other hand, Cole helps Will unlock and lock his locker with her magic, and she grows a little concerned on seeing his sword in the locker. After that, they head to the study hall, where Will begins writing notes about a war between dwarves and elves, who were from another world and the citizens of this world. As Cole points out that he has already finished his history book, he tells her that he is trying to write notes from the perspective of dwarves today. He says that he can't miss even one credit in writing, so he has to work extra hard, and on top of that, he can understand the dwarves who fought against the mightiest mages of their time with sheer grit and willpower. Cole is impressed, but then she suddenly notices a gray hair on Will's head. She is oddly eager to pluck it out when suddenly the Snape ripoff appears behind them and tells Will to follow him. He leads into the spell practice hall and says that he's going to give him a supplemental lesson because he can't accept that someone can stay in the academy despite failing all the spell work exams. Will is astonished because Ed never gives supplementary lessons to anyone, but just then, Ed reveals his true intentions. He tells Will that he is going to test his abilities himself and suddenly shoots a warning attack towards him. Will is perplexed now, and then Ed tells him that his challenge is to land a single hit on him. If he succeeds, he will award him 5 spell work credits, but if he fails, he will be expelled. Will has not even processed what is happening as Ed begins gathering his magic, and then creates a magic circle under his feet. On the other hand, Cal summons Wok to her office to fill him on the details of the test Ed is going to conduct to determine Will's fate. She creates a water screen behind herself to show Will facing Ed, and Cal tells Wok that she has decided to give Ed a chance to prove his conviction to her. Wok tells her that it is unfair because Ed is the closest person in the academy to become the next Magiavander, and he has already reached the top of the tower. In the practice hall, Ed keeps spamming low-level dark magic attacks at Will, but their power is as great as an intermediate spell. Will can only keep running away from his relentless assault, but then he finds an opening and rushes towards the professor with full speed. He tries hitting him with a roundhouse kick, but Ed blocks that with a barrier that deflects him away. As he is in mid-air, Will gets hit by an attack and he drops his glasses as he falls to the ground. He has realized that Ed has no holes in his attack or defense and he can't even scratch him. Ed tells Will that he will use just 2 spells against him, limited to the dark flame attack and the barrier to repel his physical attacks. He suddenly creates dozens of magic circles in the air to launch a barrage of dark fire attacks, and no matter where Will tries running to, Ed's attacks find him. He is severely injured and loses hope of winning against the professor, who is much stronger than him. At the same time, the injured Kiki runs to the locker room to find Cole and gestures towards Will's locker. Cole understands that Will is in trouble, so she quickly opens the locker. Meanwhile, Will is on the ground and Ed walks towards him slowly, telling him that Magiavander are at the pinnacle of mages and someone who can't even beat him has no chance of reaching their level. He asks Will a question about the war between dwarves and mages. He asks how many mages it took to defeat the army of 10,000 dwarves, and as Will tries to get up, Ed stomps on his feet and yells that it took just one mage to annihilate them all. He declares that the sword will never reach the wand and asks Will to give up, but he strains and gets up, saying that he still wants to become a Magiavander. He grabs Ed's lack, but the professor kicks him away and then asks what is it that drives him to desire such heights. Will declares that he wants to be a Magiavander to be with the person he loves, and Ed is dumbfounded. He deems Will's reasons to climb the tower impure and stupid, but Will declares that the reasons are pure and grand to him. He yells that he will definitely see the sunset with Elfie, and just then, Cole comes there and throws his sword towards him. As Will grabs the sword, he gets his confidence back. He wears his action goggles and gets ready for battle, and Ed is determined to completely defeat him now. He shoots a dark flame at him, but Will simply deflects it with his sword. Ed prepares another attack, and though Will is so scared of the professor that he wants to run away, he rushes straight ahead. He dodges Ed's attacks and leaps up using the flying rubble as foothold. He recalls the story of the war with the dwarves that ended when the only surviving dwarf warrior managed to push ahead and land a blow on the mage, earning his respect and recognition for the rights of dwarves. That is what he wants to do now. He evades all of Ed's attacks and then uses the roof as his foothold to dart towards him, shattering his magic barrier. Will swings his sword at the professor and stops at the last moment. Ed also has his wand facing Will, like he is the one who lost the challenge because Will managed to leave a cut on his face. The professor grits his teeth but still accepts the outcome. He begins walking away as he awards Will 5 credits in his subject. Cole runs towards Will, who is passed out from all the excitement and anxiousness. Cal and Walk also finish watching the fight, and they are impressed by Will's abilities and decision-making that enabled him to overcome one of the strongest mages of their era. Some days pass by and Will wakes up after having a dream about the last time he saw Elfie when she gave him the glasses as a gift while she was heading off to the Upper Institute to start her journey as a Magiavander. She happily told him that she will always believe in him before turning away and walking, while Will, unable to believe how pathetic he is, makes a promise to Elfie that no matter what, even after not having a speck of magic in him, he will definitely make it to the top and become a Magiavander so that they can be together again and see the sunset one day. Elfie turns around with tears in her eyes and tells Will that she will wait before leaving. Walk was a witness to all this as he stands in the side a little sad, knowing that Will can never really become a mage like her. But Will turns around and tells Walk that he will work the hardest and promises that this is the last time he will cry at his own weaknesses. He has kept that promise ever since and has become the most hardworking student in the entire academy by far. He not only studies the hardest to make sure he doesn't lose any credits, but also does part-time work every morning to earn money. He is now friends with a lot of townspeople and fast enough that he grabs all the newspaper mid-air after he tripped and put it in his bag again. One of the newspaper falls and he checks it to find out that Elfie has created yet another new magic spell and became the first mage ever to create 12 new magic spells. This fills him with motivation as he decides to work even harder, but notices that Elfie has also released a quest as she needs some special items to work on her new magic. He immediately rushes back to his room and tells his roommate Rosti that he needs a couple of items as he is going into the magical forest to collect all the items that Elfie needs. He tells her that the crystals needed are present on the 4th floor on the dungeon, so that's where he is headed as he takes the magic items that Rosti has repaired for him. He bids her goodbye, but before he could leave, she shoves a bread down his gullet as a breakfast. The news is spread like wildfire, and since today they have no classes, most of the students are busy in the dungeons killing monsters and collecting whatever items is required by Elfie. Will realizes that he is already late as the entire area where he wanted to collect items was overcrowded with mages performing their spells. He decides to try some other place when suddenly the ground beneath him shakes as he notices that Cheyenne seems to be taking it pretty seriously as he kills a monster with one hit, while his homies congratulate him. Cheyenne doesn't seem happy with it though, as he realizes that these are just small fries compared to the giant monster that Will dealt with all on his own without any magical talent. Will seems surprised to see Cheyenne so concentrated and driven, which makes him realize that he quickly needs to get rolling, otherwise there wouldn't be anything for him to collect at all. He jumps down a couple of icicles when he spots a girl crouched in the middle of the floor while 3 bird monsters were going to attack her. He realizes that she is frozen with fear, so he immediately puts on his glasses and jumps forward, slicing every single monster with a single slice of his sword, saving the poor scared girl. The blondie is shocked to see that this student killed these monsters all alone with just his sword and immediately thanks him for his help before introducing herself as Iris. Back in the academy, Wok is teaching the other students about the creation of new magical spells. He tells them that creating a new magic spell is an incredibly difficult process, and whenever someone creates a new form of magic, their name gets associated with the spell for eternity. Everyone seems in awe with this, as it means that they will literally carve a name for themselves in the annals of history. One of the students asks whether Elfie is a really good mage compared to the other spell creators in history, and Wok tells them that, simply stated, Elfie is beyond amazing. He admits that he has never heard of any mage being able to create 12 different spells in a lifetime, and she is going to be remembered in the history books for all eternity. Calden was sitting in the class, tells her friend that Elfie is the friend that Will is chasing after, and the friend immediately starts teasing her for liking Will. Wok ends up telling them to stay quiet, so they apologize, while Cole starts wondering whether Will is inside the dungeon because of Elfie once again. Back in the dungeons, Will and Iris start walking together as Iris tells him that she is 2 years her junior and claims that she has heard a lot about him, as he is the completely talentless bookworm who can't conjure even the simplest spells. Will smiles and asks her whether she feels any hatred for him because someone as untalented as him helped her, but she innocently replies that she can never dislike someone who just saved her life. She claims that she knows that different people are talented in different ways, and she just wants to be of any help to the Magiavanders so that they can finally see the real sky once. This makes Will think about how they have been living a lie till now, because technically speaking, the sky is still covered in complete darkness, and the sky they see is a replica of the actual sky created by the Magiavanders while they try to fight against the forces of darkness. According to the lore, the barrier will fall one day, and the entire world will get covered by darkness once again, and that's how the end will come. While walking, Iris tells him that she has met Elfie once, which grabs Will's attention. She tells him that once she was trapped inside a dungeon, completely alone and helpless. She got surrounded by a myriad of monsters and was just about to get killed when suddenly Elfie arrived and froze every single monster in the area effortlessly before picking her up and saving her from certain death. She starts fangirling over Elfie when Kiki spots something suspicious, and Will starts looking into it. He tells Iris that he just found some traces of a Frostwalker who might be ahead, and it seems like this one is a giant. She is confused how he knows all this since he can't even use magic, but he claims that inside a dungeon, experience is just as important as magic. He immediately takes out one of the magic items and gets ready with his glasses on when suddenly a huge monster drops from above. Will was already expecting this, so he immediately carries Iris out of the way, who doesn't even have the time to react to what's happening around her. She looks at the giant ice monster and realizes that it's a Frost Rex, known as the strongest Frostwalkers alive, who is worth 4 credits if killed. The monster seems to be in a hurry as he immediately shoots an ice beam towards Will, who again dodges the ray as it creates sharp icy spikes on the ground. Will puts Iris down and tells her to stay behind, but she tells him that he can't possibly defeat a Frost Rex with physical attacks, as anything it touches turns into ice. She claims the only way to defeat it is with long-distance fire magic, but Will tells her to chill out and let him handle it. He immediately pops a magic item on his hand while the monster was charging its ice beam and runs ahead at the perfect moment while the monster shoots its ice ray. He starts dodging the ray at super speed, making the monster confused about where Will is while he jumps behind the icy creature and hides. The monster starts shooting its beam everywhere, while Will expertly runs around it before throwing his magical hook around the monster's body. The monster tries to shoot him, but he dodges and tightens the cord around its body before running circles around its body, completely trapping it as the monster struggles to move. After that, Will stands in front of it, while the monster tries a last-ditch effort to free itself and creates a blizzard. Frost starts forming on Will's face, but he stands through it and lights the fuse on his hand, which is connected to the cord tied around the monster's body. The fuse slowly burns and reaches the bombs, which explode with a tremendous bang, enveloping the frosty beast in fire while the shockwave pushes Iris away. The heat generated by the blast seems to be hot enough that the entire monster dissolves into nothing more than a puddle of water. He retracts the hook back into his hand and reminds himself to thank Rusty for her magic items, as without them, he would have never been able to kill this huge monster. He walks ahead to get the core and tells Iris that this should be more than enough for Elfie's research and tells her that they should move back. Iris seems to be lost in her thought, but suddenly looks at him and smiles eerily as if hiding something, but agrees to return back, not showing her true intentions for coming to the dungeon, which was to spy on Will and report back to the Upper Institute about the boy who was trying to conquer magic with a sword. A couple of months pass by, and finally the big day for the final combat examination arrives. All the students gather in the examination hall, where Shine and Call go first against their enemies, who are going to be special mechanical golems, which they have to defeat in order to get points. Cheyenne seems to be extremely motivated as he gets to it and starts using his flame blast to destroy all the golems that came near him. while Call is much smarter and simply uses the rocks falling from Cyan's destruction to her advantage, and with her teleportation magic, she makes the rocks appear on top of the golems, crushing the remaining ones into hundreds of pieces. The instructor yells from the top, claiming that both Call and Cyan have passed the final examination and have enough credits to move on to the higher institute. Meanwhile, Will runs around the golem with his wand in hand, dodging and ducking around the golems, trying to find a way to defeat these massive robots as he can't use any kind of magic. He tries to slip through the golem's attack to find an opening for a punch, but the students start making fun of him, claiming that this is a magical academy, not your average karat dojo. His momentary distraction gets him a smack by the golem as he is thrown away to the ground as he tries to wonder how to defeat his enemy. He looks towards people who are at a position that he can never achieve as the blonde girl named Leah uses her lightning magic to create arrows which she impales in all the golems in front of her, completely frying their circuits and destroying them, while another green-haired guy called Wig uses his wind magic to create a tornado, shredding the golem as if it was in a blender. The instructor announces that both of them have passed the test as well, and the next guy enters the arena. This blue-haired boy is known as Julius, known for his strong ice magic, which he immediately uses on all the golems nearby, and with a swift flick of his wand, all the golems get completely frozen in a wall of ice, incapacitating them as he casually walks through them with an air of superiority, while the instructor announces that Julius has passed as well. He walks towards Wig and Leah, who are the only two people apart from him who got the score of over 10,000. He tells them that he has finally found a way to easily overpower them and creates a small flower before throwing it at them as a sign of disrespect, but Wig immediately shreds it with his wind magic, while Leah destroys whatever was left with her lightning magic before walking away. Meanwhile, Will simply feel depressed as he slacks against a pillar, realizing that let alone getting to the higher institute, he doesn't even have enough to graduate. With a score of 5.5 thousand, he still lacks around 2,000 points to graduate, which is going to be nearly impossible to achieve since it is his last year at the academy. Suddenly, he notices Julius walking by with his lackeys, and he immediately stands up to show respect, while Julius calls him a loser and moves on as if he was an insignificant piece of trash. Later that afternoon, he goes to have lunch when he is joined by Call, who tells him not to look so depressed as he still has a chance of advancing to the higher institute. She tells him that the Grand Mage Festival is about to start, and that would be his biggest chance to directly get a ticket to the upper institute regardless of not having enough credits. The Grand Mage Festival is an incredibly huge deal for this magical academy, as it is held every 2 years and the most talented wizards and witches take part in it to showcase their skills because some anonymous scouts from the upper institutes come down to look for talent. This is an important festival for all the students as they can turn the tide of their life with a single try if they manage to catch the eye of a scout who can directly promote them regardless of their credits. There is also a chance that they get selected directly to one of the 4 factions: the Wind faction, the Flame faction, the Lightning faction, and the Ice faction. Will is still not convinced though, as he reminds Call that these kinds of promotions rarely happen, and regardless of that, he doesn't want to stand out and will probably work behind the scenes. He reminds her about the event 2 years ago when he took part as a challenger but got booed by the entire crowd, who called him a cheater as he didn't even know how to use magic. They look outside to see the grounds filled with people practicing their magic to the limit in order to get ready for the festival, but Will seems to have lost his confidence as he walks to his locker room, claiming that he can't use any magic, so it's pointless for him to enter. Suddenly, Call realizes that a magical barrier has been cast near one of the lockers, and with the help of Kiki, she manages to break it. They open the locker door to find out that it has a hidden staircase that leads down into darkness. Both Call and Will decide to follow the stairs as they could hear sound coming from below, but they are shocked to find out that this secret hideaway is nothing but an underground gambling den, which is completely illegal. The students below seem to be placing bets on who will win the festival, with most of them placing their money on Leah, Wig, and Julius. Suddenly, Will notices that Cheyenne is also there with his crummies, looking down with a hidden anger in his eyes. He immediately gets mad at Will for no reason, but Call warns him not to start any pointless fights. Will realizes that Cheyenne is insecure about his position in the betting, since not a lot of people are placing bets on him to win. He proudly declares that he is just as good as Wig and Leah, but is trailing in points because he got lazy with his coursework. Cole makes fun of him for being jealous, but he pushes her aside and angrily walks away, while a sad Will looks down all the glamour that mages can achieve while he can do nothing. That night, he returns to his part-time job working in a tavern owned by a lady named Gina. The night seems to be lively as people fill up the area for food and drink. He immediately goes out to serve all the dwarves who are there to eat, and they all seem to know and like Will. One of the older dwarves named Don asks Will why does he work so hard, as he delivers newspapers in the morning, then goes to school, and then in the evenings he works in the tavern. Will tells him that since he doesn't have any scholarships, this is the only way he could pay for his tuition. Jaina tells him to stop yapping and work because they are already low on workers tonight. Thankfully for him, Rose, being a good friend, decided to lend a helping hand to him and covered for the other workers for this shift. Later, when the tavern was less crowded, Will thanks Rose for her help tonight. While she asks why doesn't Will ask Professor Wuck to find him a job, as these dwarves definitely can't pay him a lot. Will tells her that he doesn't want to create any more problems for Wuck, and moreover he likes working here as the dwarves don't discriminate against him and he respects them for their strength in battle and their craftsmanship as well. Suddenly the door opens and the blue-haired jackass Julius enters the tavern. With a look of disgust, he asks his cronies why did they bring him to such a shitty place, and they reply that this was the only place open at this moment. Suddenly Julius notices Will standing behind the bar, cleaning up, and starts laughing and making fun of him, commenting that it suits well on Will since a loser with no magical talent can only fit in with the ugly, disgusting, and pathetically weak dwarves. This enrages Don, who gets up from his seat in anger, but another dwarf stops him. As if a dwarf lays hand on a mage, it's almost like a death sentence for them. Julius looks at the dwarf with contempt and tells him to keep his eyes down where it belongs and thank the mages for letting such third-class creatures like the dwarves to even exist on this planet. He then sits on one of the benches and demands for food to be served. Rosti immediately goes ahead and puts down a dish of beans, but Julius and his party make fun of the food, claiming that this is peasant food that even their dogs won't eat. Hearing all this disrespect, something snaps in Will as he takes off his apron and walks outside towards Julius, telling him to take back his insults. Julius doesn't really care and kicks the food away at Will, disrespecting him even more, while his cronies get up to deal with him. This time, Will is not playing around as he grabs them by the collar and smashes them into the floor, knocking them out immediately. The drinks splatter all over Julius, which makes him mad, and he immediately gets his wand out and starts attacking Will with his magic icicles. Will barely dodges one of the ice shards that catches glasses, but he backs off. Julius pursues and uses his magic to corner and trap Will completely. He then walks up to him and creates a rose on his chest, slowing down his heartbeat as he tries to scare Will into submission. This all is wasted though, as Will doesn't seem to care at all and glares straight up at Julius. This enrages him and he removes Will from his shackles, claiming that this won't be enough of a punishment and he wants to humiliate Will in front of the entire city and all the great mages. He challenges Will to join the Great Magical Festival for a duel against him and promises that if Will wins, he will apologize to the disgusting dwarves. But if not, then he will torture Will and force him to leave the Magical Academy for good. Will looks at him with a newfound resolution and grabs his wand, claiming that he is definitely going to enter the festival and make sure to defeat Julius at any cost.